Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of The People's View. No Carl Seidel, as you can see today, but I've got my good friend Chris Williams, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and it's going to be great talking about a lot of different things. Mainly, I guess we want to start with politics. Sure. Now that I'm a civilian, we can talk freely about it. But,
you can.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, obviously, I think what was very interesting to me here in New Hampshire was to see how strongly the Democrats performed up and down the ticket. Putting the presidential election aside, the fact that Maggie Hassan won the governor's race as comfortably as she did, she actually outperformed Obama here in New Hampshire in terms of her victory margin, which I was surprised by. And then, of course, you saw right down the ticket with both congressional races flipping over to the Democrats, and then the state Senate, the Republicans significantly losing their majority down to a very slim margin now. And then, of course, the House probably being the biggest shock of all to actually watch that flip from 300 Republicans to now, less than 180 and losing the majority along with it. I think that a lot of that was a symptom of what we have seen over the past 6 years. Back in 2006, you saw the political pendulum here in New Hampshire swing wildly over to the Democratic side. They swept into the power then, took control of the House for the first time in 100+ years. Mm-hmm. And then you watch that pendulum swing again, all the way to the other extreme in 2010, where the Republicans swept into office, 300-seat majority to only 100 Democrats in the House, 19 Republicans in the Senate, and now we've watched it kind of go back into the middle here. So I kind of wonder if the electorate in New Hampshire is simply saying, you know what, we're tired of going from one extreme to the other. It's time for some moderation up in Concord. And certainly what you have up there now in terms of the political landscape is very much a landscape of moderation. You have a governor-elect who ran on portraying herself as a moderate Democrat. You have a Republican Senate president who was very moderate in his approach and on his own issues, positions on those issues. And then you've got a slight majority there for the Republicans. And then you look at the House, it's the same thing. You have a slight majority for the Democrats. Not a comfortable one, but it's enough of one that they clearly are the majority, but it's not so much of one that they can simply do whatever they want. So I think the voters in New Hampshire were saying, you know what, we're tired of going from one end of the spectrum to the other like we've done over the last 6 years. It's time to put the pendulum more in the middle and see if we can have a more moderate approach with nothing too extreme on either end, either social issues or otherwise.
See, I don't know if I buy that.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. I don't think that, first of all, especially from a state rep standpoint, other than maybe the speaker, the leader, maybe a chairman of a controversial committee that's going on, no one even knows who they are. Mm-hmm. And what most of us saw, especially in Nashua, I had more votes. I might have said this in the last show, but I had more votes this time in my ward than I had in my past 2 elections.
Okay.
And I still lost I was the top vote getter for Republicans, but I still lost by almost 400 votes.
Yeah.
So I think the base was there. I think the people who knew, of politics and local politics paid attention. But that Obama dynamic, which I think is, we had in Nashua was like 7,500 same-day registrars. Mm-hmm. In my neighborhood or my ward, there's a lot of condos, and most of them were condos that were same day. There was 1,000 in Ward 8, same day. So I think what it was is they just came out because of the unions. I think we rattled the cage with the, like I said, we went after Goliath with the unions, with right to work last time. And the biggest single employer, you'd know more than anybody in the state of New Hampshire, is the state of New Hampshire. There's more jobs with government jobs than anything else. Teachers, firemen, police.
Yeah, certainly I think the right to work issue is one of those that probably did engender a lot of controversy. Did it engender enough to bleed over into the elections? I don't know. But what I do know is that if it really were a whole lot of people coming out to vote for Obama, and then they just simply ticked off Democrat all the way down the ticket, then Obama should have performed even better than he did here in New Hampshire. But he didn't. Maggie Hassan performed better, and the congressional candidates, in fact, Annie Custer, also outperformed Obama. So I think what it really was a lot of new voters coming in who hadn't voted before, who were tired of the extremism. And candidly speaking, I think Speaker O'Brien really was the poster boy for a lot of Democrats who went out and campaigned and said, if you've had enough of extremism in Concord and if you had enough of that sort of tenor, this is the guy who's caused it all. And I think a lot of new voters reacted to that. And the evidence, again, is when you look at the fact that Obama won by a smaller majority than some of these state-level candidates for different offices.
Was it that way statewide, or was it just in the cities?
Well, and that's a very good question, because when you look at the communities outside of Nashua, there wasn't as much change over there. You still saw a lot of incumbents win their seats. Certainly in the metro centers. When you look at Nashua's delegation, Manchester is the same thing. Concord has always been more Democratic anyway. But certainly the urban centers saw a more significant changeover. Now, that being said, you still saw more changeover in certain counties or in towns where you had historically always had Republicans win, and you were seeing one or two Democrats suddenly pop up and win seats in those towns. I think Londonderry might be an example where a Democrat actually won a House seat in a town that is a bastion
That's
of
right.
Republicanism.
It was the first one, they said,
in
a long
decades.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I think, I think the election was legitimate. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that we learned as Republicans, or we need to learn, is the ground game. They're better at it. They get out. I think a lot of the, I've been saying this lately, I think the original elitism started really with Republicans more so than it was Democrats. And now the Democrats have gone to they're more of the elitists that just think they got to think for everybody. And if we don't start putting out better candidates that, if I have enough money, why do I want to be governor for $125,000?
Or a state rep.
Or a state for nothing.
Yep.
So all of us in that boat was really evident. I mean, this past term, we must have had Democrats and Republicans, but there were more Republicans that had to resign because of work. The Senate got decimated this time. You had good guys like,
Yeah, Ray White being an example.
Foster, not Forster. Forrester.
Yep, Forster, Ray
Forsyth,
White.
yeah.
Yep, I'm sorry, Forsyth.
Yeah,
Yep,
I
and
always
Ray
say it
White
wrong.
both, for work reasons.
Gruen.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's another one that Gary Lambert. So you could go down the list. So, I was saying if I got back in this time, what I was assuming would be in the majority. But one of the things that I wanted to go after is one you could do in House rules, which I think is imperative, is you should not be able to vote on budget issues if you're a state employee as a rep, if you receive a pension as a state employee, or if you have a spouse that does. There's 67 last term that Republicans, and most of them were Republicans, to be honest. That's how we lost right to work. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It was because of the 37 Republican union workers that refused to go against the union. So they lost the override for us. There's conflict of interest and everything else. If that's not a conflict of interest, that I'm protecting my pension by voting for it, I mean, it doesn't even make sense to me how we can allow that.
Yeah, that's not an issue we really followed all too closely, only because we were more in tune to some other business issues, I guess, that were directly related to business issues here in New Hampshire rather than pension reform. It's clearly an important issue, probably one of the biggest that faces New Hampshire in the next 10 years. That being said, back to your original question about the ground game for Democrats versus the ground game for Republicans, I certainly agree. The Democratic ground organization in New Hampshire here was phenomenal, as it was nationwide.
Yeah.
I was talking with a couple of very good friends of mine who are pretty involved in Democratic circles here in New Hampshire, and they were blown away by the level of sophistication leading up to the election and the depth of that ground game. And these guys have been around for several decades, and both of them were just blown away by just how deep that ground game went compared to the Republican ground game, which really didn't do that whatsoever.
Until they, I mean, I don't know if I said this to you before, but until they really get this simple, to me, simple philosophy down. When I campaigned, and I have to admit, I didn't campaign nearly as hard as I did the first two times, but it wouldn't have made a difference in this particular outcome. There's no way, the 400 votes just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
The two Democrats that were ahead of me, well, obviously there were three, but the bottom two never even had a sign.
Okay.
Never sent anything out, never did anything,
Yeah.
and they got in. So what I'm getting at is, until we learn as a party to start, as I used to do when I would do my radio show, I've interviewed almost every single candidate except for Romney. I'd ask him, are you willing to play Smash Mouth? Because if you don't go out there, and that's how Obama got in twice. The guy got a free ticket. He wasn't vetted. He could never, if he had an R after his name, would he be president of the United States. They would have vetted him. He would have gone as far as Reverend Wright, and that would have been it. But nobody would talk about it. So if we don't start doing that and start going out, playing their game, we're just, I give this analogy all the time, we're like the British Army marching down the middle of the field and, being honorable so we don't destroy property and women and children. And they're like Mao Zedong's Book of Warfare. They got punji sticks and they're in the trees with camouflage and everything else. You can't fight that war like that. So we got to get more to the 21st century and to go after it. Maybe this time was a wake-up call, at least for New Hampshire, to do something.
Yeah, I won't really respond to that because that's more of a partisan question than a business-related question. But what I will say is that I think here in New Hampshire specifically, there was this air of incivility that a lot of voters saw, specifically in the House. And I think it's fair and accurate to say that Speaker O'Brien really shouldered a lot of the responsibility for that. And I'm hoping that we will see a little bit more tempered tenor up there in the House, especially this next time around. And I say that with full awareness. I know you were part of the leadership team up there in Concord. I don't put this on your shoulders, but I do put it on Speaker O'Brien for the big swing that we saw this last time.
In his defense, though, again, it goes back to the ground game. I don't know, I've heard different stories about what Buckley makes, but ours is volunteer.
Right,
again.
the chairman position, yes.
So
yeah.
O'Brien was doing both. The press releases, the things that came out, they came out of our office. That should have been the GOP's responsibility to do that.
Okay.
So then he wouldn't have to be, half the stuff that Norelli does, people don't even see it because that's what's just taking place there. All the statements and stuff that come out, they come out of Buckley's office. She doesn't go in there and fight with Sununu on TV. He did it.
Okay.
And that's how it should be. And, Sununu was a unique thing. He's the last, in my opinion, real leader that we had because he didn't care. He went after, he'd go after Lynch. Every time the guy did something, he was there doing it. And that was a valuable lesson for me to see in there last time. If we don't do that this time, it's going to be the same thing. You need to, you can't have your leader also be your propagandist, if you will, that go out there and rattle the trees a little bit.
Yeah.
So they need to fix that.
Yeah, and again, that's more of kind of internal, behind the curtains, where I don't really have
But it's money.
access to that, being more where I sit as a chamber president. It'll be interesting to see, what does the Republican Party do in New Hampshire going forward after the election results that we saw. I suspect that we probably will see the House minority leadership in Concord this next time around, and the Republican majority leadership in the Senate really actively and publicly trying to stretch a hand over the aisle and say we are willing to work, in a bipartisan fashion. And it'll be up to the Democrats, who took the power in the House and are very much of an influence in the Senate to receive that and return it at the same time. So will it happen? I'm optimistic that it will. But we
Well,
don't
all my
know yet.
friends up there, if you're going to do what Mr. Williams says, make sure you get some good gloves because you're going to get your hand bit every time you do it.
Well, and speaking only to the business issues, as long as they are business issues that they are crossing the aisle on, I think we have some common interests on both sides of the political aisle. There are a couple of yellow flags for me, but overall, I know our governor-elect certainly campaigned on specific issues that are of big importance to Nashua. And looking at the Senate and the House leadership, they seem to be supportive of that. So things like passenger rail and R&D tax credit, I think we'll see some good progress made this year that did not see progress over the last couple of years.
What about gambling?
That's a big one. It's a $64 million question. I think gambling's probably got one of its best chances to pass over the next 2 years than it has had before. The governor-elect has made it very clear she is open to the idea of one casino in New Hampshire, and she's open to that being put out to a bidding process and let the cards fall where they may. So that's a big change compared to Governor Lynch, who was always quietly very opposed, and then in the end of his tenure, very publicly opposed to gambling coming in. So that's probably the biggest sea change that we are going to witness.
Well, it's definitely the most bipartisan issue that I've saw in the years I was up there. You really can't, it's almost 50-50 within the party. You know, there's half the Democrats are for it, half are against, same with the Republicans.
Yeah.
It's a weird, that's a weird thing. I supported gambling.
Yep.
My first term I didn't because the way that they wrote the bill was just, so, it was a Democrat that did it, but it really made up my mind. Whoever it was, I don't think she was there last term, went on in the well and just her whole presentation was like she took, this is New Jersey's bill or something, this is Massachusetts' bill, and here was ours. Okay. It just was like, you could tell it was just thrown together, and it just didn't make any sense. It was way lopsided toward the casino owners than for the state. Yep. And honestly, to me, it was like, it's just giving a crack addict more crack. If they didn't have ways to control spending, to give them another $200 million, they'd spend $300 million. So I was against it. Yeah. This time I supported it.
Yeah, our chamber came out 2 years ago publicly endorsing a proposal for gaming that included the opportunity for a resort to be built here in the Nashua area, specifically over in Hudson. Yeah. So we'll have to look at the proposal, whatever that proposal is, when it comes together this next year. I suspect it'll be largely in line with what the governor-elect wants to see, which is one resort, put it out to bid, and see which location ends up winning that sort of a bid.
I just don't see, it's like anything else. You hear about the stories that, people are going to lose their homes, and you're going to have people getting, involved with going to rehab, and we have to pay for it and all that stuff. You're going to pay for it anyways if they go to Mass. And they're your residents.
Yeah, the proposal that we endorsed 2 years ago specifically set money aside for social service programs and plans aimed toward substance abuse and gambling and such. I'm going to bet, no pun intended, that this proposal will probably also include monies set aside for those types of services as well.
Well, that is a pretty good segue to talk about some things locally. I saw in the paper about a week ago that you're looking at trying to do some type of art center. And one of the things with gambling with me is for people over 40, there's nothing to do around here. Yeah. I like going to, I said this before on air, to Mohegan Sun, to shows. I don't really gamble, but it's just you go in there to things like Disney World. So anything we do that could to help promote stuff for us old folks to get out and do something without going to a disco. So tell us about that.
First of all, I don't put you in the old folks category. Number two, the story that you're referring to was a piece in the Telegraph that was asking various stakeholders in the community, what do you envision Nashua looking like 10 to 20 years from now? And in that story, I had expressed my desire to see Nashua become not just the economic engine for New Hampshire, but also the arts and cultural headquarters or epicenter for New Hampshire. And I think we've got the right pieces in place to allow that to happen. We have a river right through our downtown that is significantly underutilized right now. We have certain properties in the downtown. The owners of those properties are keen to do some pretty big things. You got the Mill Yard, the Parkway coming through the Mill Yard in the next few years, which is going to open up the access into there. And you've also got key leadership, I think, in various organizations and entities here in the community that would be important politically to help put some muscle behind a real art center. And then perhaps most importantly, you've got certain benefactors, philanthropists here in the community who for a long time have been advocates of the arts and are just waiting for the right champion to come along and pick up that flag and run with it. So I'm optimistic that there could be a recipe put together with all these different entities in the next 5 to 10 years that would result in a real state-of-the-art performing arts center that has a lot of flexibility within that facility. It could house something as small as a 200-seat box theater, so the Peacock players or the actor-singers, if they wanted to have a small play or a performance, they could do that in this facility. But we would also have the flexibility in this facility to house 1,500 to 1,800 people. And there's the space for it. There is the amenities for it downtown in terms of a great dining community, great restaurant scene already, the river, the access coming into the Mill Yard. So I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, if the right champion were there to advocate for that, we could see that happen. It's going to cost $38 to $40 million, but that's nowhere near some of the big projects that Nashua has taken on before and has done so successfully.
Well, like you said, you'd have a lot of private funding, I'm assuming, with it too.
Yes, you'd have to have the seed money come in from the private sector to make that happen. But the conversations I have anecdotally and informally in this community make me feel very strongly that not only should we do it, but I think we could do it as well.
I think it would be great. Like, I love going up to, what's the name of the, Meadowbrook?
Yes.
In the summertime, you know, and that doesn't, you know, it's nice going there, but when you get in there, there's really no scenery inside of it. It's next to the airport. But it'd be cool, and as we were talking off air about the World's Fair, they actually built the theater that was on the Mississippi, so you'd see the boat, you know, the river boats going by, and that's where they were holding their concerts during the World's Fair in '84. But that would be really something to have.
It would be. I mean, right, you said it a few minutes ago. Right now, Nashua's got great restaurants, but after you're done eating dinner, what do? You know, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, there's nothing there for you, especially in the winter months. So getting a performing arts center here and making sure that it fits well so that it's bigger than what Manchester has, but it's still unique from what Lowell has, would give us something that a lot of people would get excited about. And that's not the only project that I want to see happen in that river walk. I also want to see an outdoor esplanade put down there on the river as well. So in the winter months, the colder months, you would have a state-of-the-art performing arts facility indoors with all of the amenities that you need for a nice off-Broadway show. But then in the warmer months, you could do concerts and festivals outside at the esplanade right on that river. And concurrent to that, of course, is the Cotton Mill building that's being reconstructed right now with all those apartment units going in. You'd have that parkway coming in at that point, and suddenly you've got yourself a revolutionized downtown Nashua that puts us even more on the map for people that are looking to do something not just within the city, but people outside the city who might be attracted to come in.
Sure, I mean, they get all the shopping they would ever want.
Absolutely. You've got great boutique restaurants and shops downtown already. We've got a terrific Pheasant Lane Mall. Now we've got the Merrimack Premium Outlets. So the retail sector is really growing in leaps and bounds here in the community. The dining scene is already there, and those are two important things that help complement a arts and cultural landscape. So we just need to fit that next piece in. And it's not going to happen overnight. You know, this is something I'm talking about now, but it's not actually going to really grow serious legs for another 3 to 5 years, and then another couple of years after that, should we get the community rally behind it the way I think it could.
So people that are listening, is there things they could do now, starting to try to show support, or should they contact the chamber?
Yes,
what should they do?
Yeah, start letting me know that they're interested in this sort of an idea. You know, I'm one person, and I run in a lot of different circles here in the community, and a lot of people, when I talk to them casually about this, they said, yes, this would be great, but I need people to come to us as well and come out of the woodwork and say, here's who I am. I've thought about this a long time too. I'm excited about what you said. What can I do? What are resources or ideas, volunteer efforts that I can lend to help make this sort of a thing happen?
Yeah, it really has been we talk about it all the time, because all my friends are on the same age as me, and like you said, what do you do? You can go to dinner, and then what do? You go to a movie, I guess.
Yep.
But that's about it.
Well, in the summer months, we have made a couple of changes that I'm excited about. This past summer, we did an outdoor dinner and movie series right off of Main Street, and then we also did a 3-part outdoor concert series downtown. And both of these series, it was the first time we tried them this last summer, but they both were extremely successful. The dinner and movie nights, we did 6 of them every other Wednesday over the summer, and we were drawing 160 to 180 people at each of those. The concerts, we did 3 of those on 3 different Saturdays this past summer, and we were drawing 500 people to those. So we're looking to not only repeat those this coming summer, but expand them. We're going to make them even bigger than they were this past summer. And for the dinner and movie series, we're considering the idea of even adding a couple of extra movie nights. So going from 6 to possibly doing 8 of them over the summer. So when it comes to doing things here in Nashua, come the warmer months, we are starting to make some strides in terms of getting over that hurdle and, again, giving ourselves some nice recreational activities to do. So stay tuned for more on that coming starting in June, most likely.
What else business-wise? Is there anything on the horizon, maybe some big companies moving here, or is anything that you've been...
Yeah, Nashua, despite this recession that we have seen in the last couple of years, we have seen some positive growth, specifically in the high-tech sector. A few companies that have moved to the area over the last year include a really exciting company right on the border between Merrimack and Nashua. That's a company called NanoComp Technologies. They specialize in cutting-edge nanofiber technology. Nanofibers being pretty much the smallest amount of material you can imagine that still has strength to it. And when you use these nanofibers to build flexible material, it can be stronger than steel. You can use them for bulletproof vests that suddenly make those things significantly lighter than straight up Kevlar, but still very flexible and extremely light and mobile. The nanofiber technology from this company has been used on spaceships going out into space and into the space station. And it's exciting to have that sort of a company right here in the Nashua area. They just expanded into Nashua here over the last about 9 months or so. Another one is a company called FLIR, F-L-I-R. It's an acronym that basically stands for infrared technology. The I and the R stands for infrared, and they do commercial uses for infrared technology that's really neat. If you're a fisherman at all, they are responsible for the newest infrared cameras that you can put in the boat to actually see the fish underwater and actually figure out where they are. So for a lazy fisherman like me, it's the best thing I can imagine for making it real easy to make sure I actually go home with a good catch. Another company is Aspen Tech. They just moved into Nashua here about 3 months ago, up from Burlington, and they're looking to bring 100 to 200 employees with them over the next year. And they specialize in software that helps companies that are out there searching for oil and other sources of energy to be able to locate that source of oil underground and such. And so they're doing some pretty exciting things globally in the energy sector, and they're, again, located right here. All 3 of those companies moving to Nashua here within the last year and a half. And I suspect we'll see more of that here now as the recession is starting to turn around.
The project they're doing at Spitbrook Road, have any stores been named on that yet, what they're going to do with that?
Not yet. You're referring to Exit 1, Spitbrook Road there. That's where the Nashua Technology Park has slowly been taking shape over the last 5 years. The project right up on the road is going to be a mixed-use project. They're looking to put some small commercial spaces in there, like a dry cleaner shop. I think they're hoping for a cafe type place to go in there as well. And then farther back in the property, they're putting up apartment buildings right now. There are 3 of them that are going up that are going to provide more housing right on the campus of that technology park. The idea behind that is that high-tech companies want to be able to come up here and relocate employees, and how cool would it be if you can actually relocate them right there onto the property itself so that they can literally walk to their office.
It's hard to call in late for work.
That is true. That is true. But imagine like how easy it would be to be able to just, roll right out of bed, get your coffee, and then 5 minutes later you take a nice little jaunt down to the office. Or you've got all the restaurants and the shopping there at Exit 1, so you really don't have to go too far for anything that you would want in terms of working or living here.
It's funny. I mean, I moved here in '87, I think it was, and I always used to say we first lived in a condo at Partridgeberry back on the other side of the highway in Exit 1, right on the Mass border. And I used to say, man, if they just, so you wouldn't have to cross over, have like a 7-Eleven or something like that, and then they opened up Sky Market, and that was a huge thing, Sky Market. And it's just grown so much.
Yeah.
But, well, we're almost out of time. Anything else we should let the people of Nashua and other areas know about the Chamber's doing? Or?
Well, yeah, if I've got a minute, the city of Nashua and the Chamber have been working together now for about 8 months on a special branding campaign for Nashua. The idea behind this campaign is that the business community and the city itself have never really come together and said, how can we collaborate to better promote Nashua as a place for companies to come and a place for workers to come and take jobs and live. And out of those conversations came the idea of this rebranding campaign that will give the city and the business community a joint brand that both of us can use. So whether you're the Chamber or whether you're the city, when we're out there talking to prospective companies, when we're out there trying to recruit more workers to come in and work at our existing companies, we'll now be using the same brand, the same message, the same talking points, and just being on the same page with each other in terms of how we're promoting the best that Nashua has to offer people who want to come up here and thrive in what is already a great state and city to live in. It's never been done before, and we raised, between the city and the Chamber, we raised about $110,000 for it. We hired 2 agencies. One agency is doing all of that focus groups and the surveys and the due diligence that goes into telling us what people think about us that are not from Nashua, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And once we know all of that and we have an idea of what the brand is going to look like, the second agency will step in to actually execute all of that. So we're in phase 2 right now. Phase 1 was doing all that homework, raising the money, and then doing the focus groups and the surveys, figuring out what that good and bad and the ugly was. Phase 2 is all the creative phase now. So we're designing what that brand is, what the logo is going to look like, what the colors are going to be. And then phase 3 will be the execution, actually building the websites that are going to promote this new brand, doing all of the strategic plan for how to roll this new brand out, getting the community, everyone engaged in that. That'll all happen in phase 3. Phase 3 should start in the January-February timeframe. So we're pretty deep into that phase 2, starting phase 3 early in January 13. The idea is that we'll launch the new brand, the new websites, and a lot of the other promotional activities tied to that brand in the April timeframe. So that's not too far from here, and we're excited about the progress we're making.
Well, Chris, we're out of time. I want to thank you for coming in. We should do this again, maybe when,
Absolutely.
Maybe when you launch it.
That would be great. I would
show the logo here.
That would be awesome. I'd be happy to do that.
We'll talk with Dick and we'll pencil in. But once again, everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The People's View, of course, sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee. And we're very fortunate to have a guy like Chris as our Chamber of Commerce leader. I've worked with him a lot on different legislative things. He cares about the city, and it's genuine.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hopefully you stay around for a long time.
I plan to.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week.